it's a lot of different connections and ways I could go with things that we just said. Again, thank you to the people who are here with us physically, virtually, and even spiritually. I think as everybody, as we have come to realize, I'm personally affected or impacted or a product of things that we talked about from incarceration. My grandfather was incarcerated, my father was incarcerated for several years of my life, and I actually still haven't met my one grandfather that is alive due to his incarceration and I guess the fracturing of my family. But I say that to say that I'm originally from Harlem, New York, was born into foster care by an orphan mother, and my parents were teenagers when they had me, so I say that to give context of me being somewhat of a talking statistic, living statistic, if you will, for people that are into data. Everything's analytics and data driven now, or maybe it was always, but I think I would just start there. As Sister Kim said, so now bringing to modern, contemporary society. I'm currently at Howard, completing my doctoral degree in African Studies, and I think again it's very. It's a couple of different words. It's a lot of words I want to say, but I think it's very apt. I think it's very and appropriate that I'm at Howard in Washington, D.C. because of what Howard represents. Howard is actually the second historically Black college that I attended and matriculated at. I started at the illustrious Morgan State University, as we call it, in Baltimore, Maryland, which I believe has a revolutionary school of thought, as much as, if not more than Howard, because Howard is a private school. And Howard is now the second private school that I attended because after I went to Morgan State, I received my master's in international public policy at Johns Hopkins. But I say that just to say, like, for me, education has kind of been like my conduit or my tool because I grew up on welfare, grew up in social services. A lot of different things happened to my mother, and I have, 7 sisters. So I say that just to, say again, like, to me, it's a lot of things I want to say, but I'm gonna try to stagger my thoughts and then be brief. Think, as we all know, women are not only important and integral to everything in society, but I think women are like the reason, like, for everything. And as the brother said, I believe Dr. Akil, ma'at and balance is important, and I think that somehow, some way, both women and especially men, like, we've somehow forgotten that. Whether it's because of erasure, we're talking about laws that are erasing African American culture, African culture, but that happens in so many different ways. And as I tell my story, I'm a human rights activist. So when I talk about human rights, a lot of men, this is just, again, just to say this, they always say, like, oh, which one, which issue do you advocate for, which issue is important to you? And to me, I always find that funny because I'm like, all of them. When I say human rights, I'm like, it's not one right, like, it's all of these rights. There's social rights, when you get into it, there's social, political, economic, cultural rights. When we're talking about institutions like the UN, the way things are codified and kind of categorized, there's so many different categories where you have to be nuanced and well-versed. But even if you don't, have a degree, informal education is just as important as formal education. So to me, it's like, again, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people in my family who didn't go to college, who didn't graduate from college, who didn't finish their high school diploma, who didn't obtain a high school diploma and finish the high school matriculation. So to me, education, which comes from the root word educe or educe, means to bring out whatever lies dormant inside the individual and in a person. And as Sister Kim said, again, as creators, as artists, I think it's important that we recognize, going back to women who are natural creators, that we are all creators and we're all given that the spirit and the ability to create. And just to kind of tie and weave everything together, as I was making the point, I think, again, all rights of all people are important. And as you mentioned, John Brown and other allies, as we call them, I think that this is another, what do I want to say, socialized or politicized way of looking at it. Again, I like to look at humanity as a baseline. And when we talk about critical race theory, which has, I guess, racial components, race is a social construct. This is again based on pseudoscience that comes from, you know, French and German philosophers and sociologists as different things happen and transpire throughout the 18th and 19th and 20th century. So again, with that context and with that understanding, for me, it's like, depending on who I'm engaging and what they're aware of, again, I would have to advocate a different way. Whether, again, it's just an African-American individual, whether it's somebody in Africa, whether, again, it's a black woman, whether it's a white woman. To me, again, going back to it, again, as the brother said, I don't necessarily look at it as being colorblind, but I think I'm very critical. And at one point, I actually wanted to get a shirt made that said race is fake. My friends told me not to because I would piss off a lot of black people. And it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to, you know, eliminate the use of race and racism and racialism, but I wanted to highlight that, again, it is pseudoscience that has been legitimized via laws, and now these same laws are trying to overturn and erase different aspects of society. So I say all of that just again to, like I said, I wanted to be brief. I think the most important thing to do, going back to the camaraderie, comrades, politically speaking, the left is the middle to me, so I'm like way off the deep end. It's so crazy, like how, again, if I really could be myself. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm an egalitarian. And I think that egalitarianism is something that we may not pick that aspect from Ella Jo Baker or a Malcolm X or a Robert Sobukwe in South Africa, where I do my research, which is what I'm doing for my dissertation right now, where gender-based violence is so rampant. And again, all of these different things they're systematic plans, if you will. And they call people conspiracy theorists when they talk about this, but to conspire means to plan. So these things are planned. So again, if you say somebody's a conspiracy theorist, that's actually possibly a positive thing, because you're saying that these people are highlighting how these things are planned and how they're all interconnected. So I say that just to say, again, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate what we're doing here. And I think, to me, the next step, after not stopping, I think is to brand activism and to brand human rights and to brand the work that scholars are doing, academics are doing, creators are doing, individuals like yourselves are doing, to make it quote unquote cool. I think for whatever reason, we don't look at these things as cool. And again, growing up, while I was in Morgan, while I was in Baltimore, whenever I would go on my little anti-capitalist diatribe, you know, people would always say, why are you talking about capitalism? Why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about race? Like, particularly, again, people at a historically black college, as if these issues weren't present anymore. And I was saying this when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, because I'm from Harlem. So again, this stuff was embedded in me. So it's easy for me to think, you know, this red, black, and green is not a fad. Pan-Africanism isn't a fad to me. It's not, now it's being used for commerce. You know, Disney is invested in different things. They have movies, Beyonce's being used. A lot of people are being used and maneuvered to brand Pan-Africanism, but to me, I think if I could talk socially, I could talk politically, but I would just like to bring us all into the center. And that's why I would end again back on the note of egalitarianism. I think as activists, as human rights defenders that you all are, I think that there's a baseline of respect and protection and empathy. There's a high level of empathy where people are recognizing each other's humanity, no matter who they may be, no matter what their social, political, cultural, and economic status may be. No matter what people are called, it's what you answer to, and how we identify, and all of these things. The way I look at it from my vantage point, I'm very, probably not the youngest, maybe could be, but I was born in 1990, and from my vantage point as a baby in this activism walk, and it's an honor to be walking in the same direction with you all. I just look at it as fragmentation has us against each other. So some people call that the race to the bottom, to where it's like the pain Olympics, and we're talking about who's oppressed more. And to me, again, if I get in my bag, as we say, I can make the argument that we're all oppressed equally. But again, it depends. Obviously, there's levels, and I hate hierarchy. Some people have it worse than others, and there's some systems that are way more severe. Obviously, patriarchy being one of them, that are so much more prevalent to where we don't even see when we perpetuate these systems. So again, I would just end by saying, again, I appreciate all of the work that you do. I can say a lot more. My thoughts are scattered right now. I'm super tired. I haven't been sleeping, as we all probably haven't, but thank you, Sister Kim, for convening this, and thank you. I want to make sure I'm set the international...
We'll say WILF. It's the easiest.
I do want to become a member. Thank you for the generations of work that you've been doing, and I also want to support your work as well. So again, it's an honor.